I think people think I'm very strange because whenever I walk down the street, I'm always kind of picking stuff up off the road. And at the moment, it's anything kind of rusted. You know, I can get very excited about something like this. I create collages and assemblages, and by assemblages I mean little constructions that I build from scratch. They tend to be three-dimensional pieces that hang on the wall, like little boxes, and I build them from card and mat board, and I incorporate a lot of vintage items into my work, things that I find in flea markets and antique fairs, and even stuff that I find on the beach or pick up on the street sometimes, rusty bits of metal, anything interesting. And the collages tend to be slightly less three-dimensional pieces, made primarily from paper and old buttons, beads, all kinds of things. This little box is completely covered in little beads here, and brass jewellery findings. This has got little vintage pieces of jewellery and buttons and things like this all over it. So it gives it this wonderful kind of rich, intriguing surface. My process is it's a long process, and I'm very particular about the way I make things, and the finish of the work has to be, I want it to be really beautifully made, and I guess I want that to be appreciated because I want people to really spend time looking at it. So I actually make the fish. Again, I build them out of card. And with these ones, I had this idea that I wanted to build dolls' heads and dolls' parts into them. So the fish had this idea of some kind of element of surprise and this human element in them. I have a sort of vision of the kind of piece of work that I want to create, and I build it from scratch. Out of mat board, I actually construct a piece from the mat board and tape it together and glue it together. Then I paper mache over the surface, and then I paint the surface, and I build around the objects that I'm incorporating into the piece. And she's going to sit under the archway like this. And I had another rusty piece of metal and shells, because scallop shells were quite significant. They have all kinds of symbolism, so I wanted to use these in here. This is going to sit in the base like this. Deciding how things kind of fit together is very much a case of trial and error, and I spend hours and hours just shuffling things around within a space. I have some idea of the scale that I'm working to, which is generally quite small, and I have some idea of the format of the work. I have a sort of vision in my head. I very rarely sketch it out in advance, and then it's a case of starting to group things together and arrange them within a space. But this is the process that I go through, where I'm just like moving things around, trying things out. And really, I won't know quite how it's going to end until it's done. A lot of my inspiration comes from the things that I like to collect. And it's quite a strange mixture of objects. They don't necessarily relate to one another, but I'm attracted to things that are packaged and that have interesting graphics on them. At the moment, I'm inspired by icons. I spent a lot of time in Mexico and New Mexico, and was very inspired by the folk art that I saw there. And so I'm building, looking at photographs as well, I'm building an iconic shaped piece with a sort of domed arch, and a figure which actually is a photograph of a figure that I have at home, a very old figurine. So that's just an example of that piece and how that's evolving. And I'm really making it up as I go along, and that's partly because I've been doing this for quite a while and I have the experience to sort of know how a piece is going to work out. I guess the starting point was this doll, and I found her in a wonderful flea market I used to go to every month in Texas. So once I had the doll, I kind of had the focal point for the piece. And they used to set these lovely scallop shells into the walls, up inside out like this, so you're looking at the inside of the shell. And I wanted that to be the frame for her head, so I really knew that I wanted her set as the centerpiece with the shell behind her head, and that really got the whole thing started. I think the reaction I'm looking for does depend very much on the particular piece and what I'm feeling about the piece I'm creating. I want it to sort of pose questions perhaps, and not be disturbing exactly, but be intriguing and a little edgy perhaps, and even a little unsettling at times. I mean, that's fine if people feel that, as long as they respond and are interested. That's what I think I'm looking for. I do like to make pieces that are interactive in some way, and I like the idea of the viewer participating other than just being a passive onlooker. I like people to discover things in the work, because that is a major part of the pleasure for me, is discovering these little gems and treasures. So this piece here, she's called Confectionery Queen. You see the little lights here come on, battery powered lights again. So rather like the icon that I'm making, this one has this element of surprise in there. I want to get my work into new places, further afield. I exhibited very widely in London when I lived in London, and throughout the United Kingdom actually, and a little bit internationally as well. And I'm ready to exhibit further afield in the United States. And I've done that to some extent, but I'd like to do more of it. I love being in Louisville, and I think any place that you go to is made by the people. You know, I think how happy you are in a place is down to the kind of people that live there, and I think Louisville has some wonderful people here, so I've enjoyed that aspect of it very much and made a lot of good friends. So.